I walked into that glass-walled conference room with my laptop under my arm, and 3 months of my life compressed into a single slide deck. I wasn't nervous. I'd rehearsed the financial models until I could recite them backward in my sleep. This was supposed to be my moment. Instead, my boss turned to me, in front of the clients, the assistants, even the catering staff, and said the words that burned themselves into my skull. "You're not invited. Go away." For a few seconds, I didn't move. I thought maybe I'd misheard. Maybe it was a joke. But he was dead serious. His tone wasn't even harsh. It was casual, dismissive, as if I were some intern who had wandered in by mistake. Everyone's eyes turned toward me. My face flushed hot, my throat locked up. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning, the shuffle of chairs, the polite cough of someone trying to fill the silence. I swallowed hard, forced my lips into something like a professional smile, and stepped back. "Understood," I managed. My hands were shaking, but I reached into my bag, pressed the side button of my phone, and slid it face down on top of the folder. Recording. Not because I had planned to. Instinct. Self-preservation. As I turned to leave, the security guard at the far end of the corridor glanced at me, confused. I kept walking, each step echoing on the polished floor. My chest felt hollow, like the sound inside an empty shell. The humiliation didn't hit all at once. It seeped in slowly, the way cold water creeps through fabric until you realize you're soaked. That meeting wasn't just another Monday check-in. It was the presentation for the Baxter account, a contract worth millions, and every single spreadsheet, scenario, and assumption inside it had my fingerprints. I'd spent weekends building sensitivity analyses, color-coding every line item, running late-night calls with procurement leads on the client side. I had done the work. But in that moment, stripped out of the room with 4 words, I felt like I didn't exist. I made it to the stairwell before the anger hit. Not the fiery kind, the cold kind that sits in your stomach like a stone. My boss had done this before. Little things. Cutting my name off email threads, presenting my graphs as if they were his, forgetting to forward invites until the last minute. But this was deliberate, public, a power move. I leaned against the wall and let myself breathe. 10 seconds in, 10 seconds out, my palms pressed against the cold metal railing. In my head, I saw flashes. The mortgage payment waiting at the end of the month. My visa renewal hanging on continued employment. My parents back home who still thought I'd made it because I was working in the U.S. I couldn't afford to lose this job. Not now. I wanted to cry, but I didn't. Instead, I opened my laptop right there in the stairwell, connected to the guest Wi-Fi, and pulled up the version history of the deck. Every timestamp, every track change, my initials across 120 edits. His? 0. My pulse slowed. Evidence, proof. I shut the laptop, picked up my phone, and listened to the first 5 seconds of the recording. His voice, smooth, clipped, unmistakable. "You're not invited. Go away." The sound of my breath catching, the shuffle of papers. That was all I needed. Walking out of that building, I felt smaller than I had in years, but I also felt something else. Something sharp, deliberate. He thought he'd erased me from the meeting. What he didn't realize was that in those 4 words, he'd just given me the one thing I'd been missing all along: leverage. I hailed a cab, sat in the back seat staring out at the city, and whispered to myself, "All right, let's play." The thing about patterns is you don't notice them at first. They creep up slowly, disguised as oversights or miscommunications, until you look back and realize you've been erased piece by piece. That was my life under him. Take the Baxter deck. 3 months of my work, yes, but it wasn't the first time. I'd seen the way he operated from the moment I joined his team. He never built, never drafted, never created from scratch. He hovered, he waited, and then, when the deliverable was shiny enough, he slapped his name on top and walked it into the boardroom like a trophy he'd hunted himself. The first time it happened, I thought I was imagining it. I'd prepared a 30-slide analysis on supply chain risks, with my initials all over the metadata. A week later, I saw the same deck, my graphs, my words, my structure, emailed to senior leadership from his account. The file properties said, created by my name, modified by his name, modified, as if copy-pasting your logo onto the cover slide counts as modification. He even had a technique for it. He'd download my draft, strip the comments, delete the version history, and then re-upload it as his. On Teams, he'd tag me only with things like, "Can you double-check these numbers?" never acknowledging the original authorship. In emails, I became support staff. By the time Baxter came along, it wasn't paranoia. It was fact. He'd done it so many times, I had a folder on my desktop labeled receipts, screenshots of Slack messages, time-stamped edits in SharePoint, a running log of every instance my name disappeared from the narrative. Call it survival instinct. Call it paranoia. I called it insurance. And it wasn't just me. I started noticing the same thing happening to others. Analysts, interns, even managers a level above me. He'd forget to invite them to client calls, then present their notes as his own. He'd delay their access to shared drives, then swoop in with the solution. Everyone knew, but no one said anything. Why? Because he had friends upstairs. He played golf with one VP, had lunch every week with another. He was untouchable. Or at least, he thought he was. I'll never forget the day I caught him red-handed. We were in a project room, whiteboards covered in sticky notes. I had just walked out for a coffee when I realized I'd left my laptop unlocked. When I came back, he was sitting at my desk, scrolling through my open spreadsheet. He didn't flinch, didn't even try to hide it. He just said, "You should lock your screen next time." Then he closed the file and walked away. That's when I knew this wasn't laziness. It was theft. Calculated, repeated, intentional. So I studied him the way he studied me. I learned his rhythms when he sent emails, usually late at night, scheduled for 6:59 a.m., to look industrious. How he phrased things, as I've been guiding the team. The words he avoided. He never used we, only I. I even tracked his calendar invites. He'd forget to include me, then CC me on the follow-up email after the fact, like a dog tossing scraps from the table. But patterns cut both ways. If you can predict someone, you can trap them. For Baxter, the trap was already set. The contract required every deliverable to list a workstream owner. Guess who was listed? Me, not him. My name was in the compliance system, signed off by legal, confirmed by procurement. It was a tiny clause buried deep in the documentation, one I'd stumbled across while cross-checking references months earlier. At the time, it felt like a minor formality. Now it felt like a loaded gun. Still, the human side hurt more than the legal side. Imagine pouring yourself into something for weeks, only to be told in front of strangers that you don't belong. Imagine walking past colleagues afterward, seeing the pity in their eyes, the way they looked down at their keyboards, as if avoiding a contagious disease. That night, I opened my receipts folder. Line by line, I built the story. Each missing invite, each stripped credit, each time his name replaced mine. I connected it all, dates, files, outcomes. It wasn't just evidence. It was a pattern so clear, so damning, that no one could pretend it was coincidence. I remember staring at the screen at 2 a.m., my apartment dark, except for the glow of the laptop, the city outside humming with late-night sirens and distant traffic. I wasn't shaking anymore. I wasn't humiliated. I was calm. Because for the first time in months, I knew the truth. He thought he owned my work, but what he didn't realize was that the work owned him, and I was the only one holding the key. The morning of the ambush didn't feel like a battlefield at first. I woke up early, ironed my shirt twice, polished my shoes until I could see my reflection in them. It wasn't vanity. It was armor. I knew the Baxter meeting was everything. I checked the calendar invite one last time on my phone. 9 a.m., conference room, A, floor 17. My name was on the list. I had triple-checked. But when I reached the lobby and tapped my badge at the turnstile, the reader blinked red. Access denied. I tried again. Same result. The security guard frowned, tried his console, shook his head. Looks like you're restricted to your floor only today, he said. My stomach sank. Restricted? Why now? I called IT. They insisted the system showed no issues. HR said maybe my manager had adjusted permissions for project security. That was the first crack in the glass. Still, I climbed the stairs to the 17th floor, hoping it was some glitch. When I got there, the glass doors were locked. I could see silhouettes inside. People moving around, laying out coffee, the shuffle of chairs. My hands were slick with sweat as I pressed the intercom. That's when he appeared. My boss. Perfect suit, smug smile, holding a folder he hadn't written a single word of. He pressed the door release and stepped out, closing it firmly behind him. You're not invited, he said. Same smooth, casual tone as if telling me the weather. Then he added, Go away. The words felt rehearsed, sharpened, designed to cut. My heart hammered in my chest, heat rushing to my face. Behind him, through the glass, I could see our clients settling into their seats. One of them caught my eye, tilted his head as if to ask, Why aren't you coming in? But my boss shifted, blocking the view, owning the frame. I stammered, I prepared the deck. He raised a hand. We've got it covered. And that was it. 4 words, 1 gesture, and I was dismissed, like a ghost. I could feel the weight of eyes around me, 2 HR reps standing near the printer, an intern clutching her notepad, even the janitor who happened to be passing by. They all saw it. That was the point. This wasn't about logistics. It was about humiliation. A public message. I control who matters here, and you don't. My throat was dry, but my mind was already racing. I slipped my phone from my pocket, thumbed the side button, and slid it into record mode. The tiny red light blinked once before disappearing. His voice, my silence, the badge denial, all of it captured. I forced myself to keep my face blank, nodded once, and walked away. My shoes echoed in the corridor louder than I wanted them to. Each step felt like I was walking deeper into quicksand, but underneath that panic was a flicker of something sharper. Clarity. I didn't head back to my desk. I went straight to the security desk downstairs. Can I get a copy of the badge access log? I asked. The guard hesitated, but after I explained that I was locked out of a critical client meeting, he printed the record. There it was in black and white. Denied at 8:52 a.m., floor 17. Time-stamped, indisputable. Next stop was my inbox. I pulled out my laptop, tethered it to my phone, and refreshed. Sure enough, there was a revised attendee list email from him, sent at 8:10 a.m. My name was missing. He had erased me that morning. Quietly, strategically, with enough time to claim it was just an update. By then, the anger had settled into something colder. Humiliation was fuel. My hands stopped shaking. My notes, my slides, my voice, they'd been shut out of that room. But the truth? The truth was sitting in my inbox, in my access logs, in the audio clip I had just recorded. I walked into the stairwell again, the same steel railings, the same silence, but this time I wasn't empty. I was cataloging. Badge log, audio, attendee list, witnesses in the hallway. Each piece stacked like bricks, building something stronger than any deck of slides, an unshakable wall of proof. Upstairs he thought he was winning, basking in the glow of a presentation he didn't write. Downstairs I was quietly laying the fuse. That night, while they celebrated with catered sandwiches and polite applause, I opened my laptop at my kitchen table and whispered into the empty room, "He wanted me gone. Fine. Let's see what happens when the ghost starts keeping score." When I got home that night, I didn't turn on the lights. I dropped my bag by the door, kicked off my shoes, and sat down at the kitchen table with just my laptop and the quiet hum of the fridge. My head was pounding, my shoulders stiff from holding in rage all day, but I wasn't tired. I was wired. Humiliation has a way of sharpening focus. Instead of replaying his words, "You're not invited. Go away," I replayed the client's face when he looked at me through the glass, confused, questioning. They had expected me in that room, and that gave me an idea. I opened the deck. My deck. Not the butchered version he'd walked in with, but the real one. The one I'd been refining at 2 a.m. for weeks. Every slide was polished, every number validated. But the brilliance of it wasn't in the formatting, it was in the appendix. The Baxter team had asked for a scenario model that stress-tested supplier risks under 5 different market shocks. My boss didn't even know about that request. They had sent it directly to me, and I had built it. So I worked. For hours. No music, no breaks. Just the click of keys and the occasional scrape of my pen across a notepad as I recalculated sensitivities. Midnight came and went. At $2 a.m., I was still staring at the cascading formulas, watching as the numbers danced across the screen. Finally, I leaned back and exhaled. Done. Now came the fuse. I logged into the compliance portal, the one my boss rarely touched because it required digital sign-offs and watermarking. I uploaded the deliverable as the official workstream owner, which, by contract, I was. The system stamped it. Time, date, my credentials encrypted into the metadata. No one could undo it, not even him. At 23:58, I attached the file to an email addressed to the joint distribution list. Not just our team, not just him. Everyone, clients, stakeholders, procurement, legal. Subject line, deliverable of record, Baxter scenario analysis. Simple, professional, unemotional. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a second. I imagined him, maybe at home with a glass of wine, basking in his victory. I hit send. A soft whoosh, and it was gone. Out of my hands, into the system, immutable. Then I sat there in the dark, staring at the sent folder. My heart slowed, my breathing evened out. This wasn't revenge yet. This was preparation. Quiet, careful, surgical. The next morning, I didn't rush to the office. I let the day start without me. Around 10 a.m., my phone buzzed with a notification, an email from Baxter's procurement lead. Short, clipped, professional. We've received 2 different versions of the deliverable. Numbers don't align. Please clarify. 2 versions, his and mine. I opened the copy he had sent earlier that morning. It was riddled with errors, typos, inconsistent assumptions, even a broken formula on one of the sensitivity tabs. He hadn't understood the model, so he had guessed, and guessed wrong. The best part? My file had already been logged into the compliance portal before his email went out. My timestamp, 23:58. His, 09:15. Chain of custody couldn't be clearer. I sat back in my chair and let it sink in. The fuse was lit. He thought he had cut me out. In reality, he had walked straight into a trap I didn't even need to spring. The system would do it for me. I closed the laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and whispered into the empty room, the same way I had in the stairwell. You wanted me invisible. Let's see how it feels when the work speaks louder than you. By noon, the emails had turned into calls. My boss was in damage control mode, shooting frantic replies to Baxter. Please disregard the alternate file. Our official deliverable is attached. Alternate file. That's what he called mine. The irony made me laugh, quietly, bitterly, because according to our own contract, his file was the alternate. At 1 p.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered, voice steady. Is this my name? A woman asked. It was Baxter's procurement counsel. Calm, precise, not wasting time. We've reviewed both versions. Can you explain why your name is listed as workstream owner in the compliance system, but you weren't in the meeting yesterday? I almost smiled. Happy to clarify, I said, but to be accurate, I should send you documentation rather than rely on memory. That night, I sent a single email. No drama, no accusations, just facts. Screenshot of the compliance portal, showing my name as workstream owner. Time-stamped badge denial log. 08:52 a.m., floor 17. Audio clip of my boss saying, "You're not invited. Go away. Revised attendee list email, 08 to 10 a.m., with my name removed. No commentary. No adjectives. Just evidence. The next morning, the storm broke. Baxter's CFO replied directly to both of us. Per contract, any deliverable must be presented or delegated by the listed workstream owner. Yesterday's meeting is void. One word, void, hit like a sledgehammer. I could imagine my boss reading that line, his jaw tightening, his carefully constructed authority collapsing under its own weight. He tried to spin, claimed I'd been under performance review, that excluding me was necessary for quality control. But facts don't bend as easily as narratives. I replied with hard metrics, revenue models I had built, client feedback emails praising my work, internal audit reports with my initials. And then came the dagger. Baxter's lead analyst chimed in. We specifically requested my name for scenario modeling. Without their input, the discussion was incomplete. Their words, not mine. Suddenly, it wasn't just my company's policy. It was the client's preference. HR got pulled into the chain. Legal, too. I could feel the silence in the office corridors, the way people avoided looking at me but hovered near, listening, waiting. Whispers spread. What happened in Baxter's meeting? Why was it voided? Why is procurement involved? My boss doubled down, of course. He always did. He called me into a private room, shut the door, and hissed through clenched teeth. You think you're clever? You're finished. I didn't flinch. I slid my phone across the table, audio recording running. Careful, I said softly. We wouldn't want another misunderstanding on the record. His face went pale. For once, he had nothing to say. That night, I sat at my desk at home, staring at the growing email chain. Dozens of messages. Lawyers CC'd, compliance copied. My humiliation from 2 days earlier now transformed into leverage stacked tenfold. He thought that shutting me out of the meeting would erase me. Instead, it erased the meeting itself. And I knew, with a calmness that felt almost like relief, this was no longer about me versus him. This was about procedure versus ego, and procedure doesn't lose. The voided meeting was just the first crack. Once the client had put it in writing, the rest of the facade began to collapse. And it wasn't because I kept pushing. It was because other people finally started talking. It began quietly. An analyst from another team sent me a message on Teams. Saw what happened with Baxter. Same thing happened to me last quarter with a healthcare client. He cut me out of the meeting, then presented my slides. If HR asks, I'll confirm. Then another ping, a manager 2 levels up. You're not crazy. He's been doing this for years. Watch your back. By the end of the week, I had a small archive of stories. My boss wasn't just stealing from me. He had built an entire career, siphoning credit from everyone around him. Interns, contractors, even peers. Some shrugged it off, too tired to fight. Others had left the company entirely. But now that Baxter had escalated things, the pattern was impossible to ignore. I decided to make it impossible to bury. Late one night, I pulled out my receipts folder and started building a timeline. Not just my work, but everything I could gather. Screenshots, old emails colleagues forwarded me, version histories with his fingerprints missing. Each entry was a data point. March 4th, my deck scrubbed of name, sent to leadership by him. June 17th, contractor's analysis presented as his own in client call. August 29th, intern excluded from kickoff invite, error corrected only after meeting. October 3rd, procurement asked why deliverable metadata listed someone else as author. It stretched for pages. By 3 a.m., I had built a dossier that looked less like office drama and more like a case file. At the top, I wrote in bold, pattern of misrepresentation. The next morning, I sent it, not to HR, not to him, but to compliance, one of the few departments he couldn't charm over lunch. 2 days later, I got the call. A calm voice, we've reviewed your submission. Please hold on to all original files and devices. We may need to mirror your laptop for forensic review. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with the surreal sense that this was real. This wasn't just my private war anymore, it was official. Meanwhile, Baxter wasn't letting go either. Their procurement lead escalated internally, and suddenly executive leadership was asking questions. Why was a key client raising concerns about our project governance? Why was the listed workstream owner excluded from mandatory meetings? Why did deliverables have conflicting versions? The silence in the office turned electric. People avoided my boss's desk. Conversations stopped when he walked past. Even the intern he had humiliated weeks earlier started keeping her head high, as if she knew the tide was turning. Of course, he fought back. He tried to frame me as difficult to manage, claimed I was not a team player. HR repeated his lines during a routine check-in with me. I sat there, hands folded, and let them finish. Then I slid the compliance portal screenshots across the table, one by one. Dates, times, signatures. Their faces shifted. The script died mid-sentence. The final blow came when an old email surfaced, one he had accidentally forwarded months earlier. In it, he had altered a line in a risk analysis I'd written, changing moderate probability to negligible before sending it to the client. It seemed small, but compliance flagged it as material misrepresentation. Suddenly, this wasn't just about credit theft. It was about liability. By the end of that week, the investigation was no longer preliminary. It was formal. I wasn't just a frustrated employee. I was a key witness. I remember sitting in my apartment, lights dimmed, scrolling through the thick email chains, the investigation notices, the HR follow-ups. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. For months I'd felt invisible, erased, humiliated. But now every piece of evidence, every line of code in my spreadsheets, every timestamp was a spotlight, pointed not at me, but at him. And I thought he wanted me silent. Instead, my silence became the loudest evidence of all. The invitation came in at 7:42 a.m. on a Wednesday. Subject line, follow-up session, Baxter Scenario Review. Sent not to my boss, not to my team, alias, but to me directly. We would like my name to walk us through the scenario model in detail. CFO, Procurement Counsel, and risk officers will attend. Please confirm availability. I stared at the screen for a long time, my coffee cooling untouched. It wasn't just an invite, it was a declaration. The client trusted me, not him. I replied with one line. Confirmed, I'll be prepared. When my boss found out, he stormed into my cubicle, eyes blazing. What did you do? He hissed, his voice low but sharp enough to cut glass. I opened my inbox. I said calmly, you might want to check yours. For once, he didn't have a comeback. He just stood there, fists tightening, jaw flexing. Then he spun on his heel and walked away, his footsteps clipped and uneven. The next 48 hours were a blur of preparation, but not the desperate kind. I wasn't scrambling to prove myself. I was organizing what I already knew inside out. The model, the assumptions, the sensitivity tests. I could run them blindfolded. What mattered now wasn't the math. It was clarity. I built a clean version of the tool, stripped of any clutter, and rehearsed my walkthrough aloud. Not in corporate jargon, but in plain, precise language. If they threw hostile questions, I wanted to answer with calm authority, the kind that makes even skeptics pause. The day of the session, I arrived 15 minutes early. My boss wasn't there. He hadn't been invited. For the first time in months, I walked into a conference room without feeling like an intruder. The clients greeted me by name. The CFO even said, "Glad you could finally join us." Finally. The word landed heavy. I plugged in my laptop, opened the model, and began. Let's start with the base case assumptions, I said, my voice steady. Then I'll show you how the model behaves under different shock scenarios. Slide by slide, tab by tab, I guided them through supplier defaults, currency swings, regulatory shifts. When the CFO interrupted, what if we assume a 20% cost spike instead of 10? I didn't flinch. I adjusted the variable live. The model recalculated instantly, graphs shifting on screen, gasps around the table. This, I explained, is why sensitivity analysis matters. It's not about predicting the future. It's about preparing for the range of futures that might come. The room went quiet. Not the awkward silence I knew so well, but the kind that means people are thinking. Respectfully, seriously. For 90 minutes, I answered every question, dismantled every doubt. By the end, the CFO leaned back, crossed his arms, and said, "This is the clarity we needed. Thank you." Procurement Counsel added, "We'll be noting yesterday's voided session as invalid. Going forward, we require my name to be present on all deliverables tied to this workstream." There it was in writing in front of everyone, a client mandate, my boss's authority, shattered by a single clause he had ignored, now replaced by my name. That evening, HR called him into a meeting. I wasn't there, but whispers traveled fast. Words like suspension, compliance review, client trust. I passed him in the hallway afterward. His face was pale, lips pressed tight. He didn't look at me. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just walked past, steady, quiet, the way you walk past the ruins of something that once felt unshakable. Because I knew then the tables had turned. He wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. He was the liability, and I was no longer the ghost in the corridor. I was the one holding the keys. The email hit inboxes on a gray Monday morning. Leadership transition announcement. The words were corporate sanitized, as they always are. After careful review, boss's name has decided to pursue new opportunities outside the company. No mention of the investigation, no reference to the compliance violations, nothing about the voided meeting that had set the entire chain reaction in motion. But everyone knew. You could hear it in the quiet laughter around the coffee machine, see it in the way people shared glances in the hallway. The man who once walked through the office like he owned it was gone. HR called me in that same afternoon. Their tone was softer now, almost apologetic. "We appreciate your cooperation throughout this process. The investigation confirmed multiple breaches of policy. We've updated our project governance procedures to ensure clearer authorship going forward." I just nodded. I didn't need their gratitude. I had my own. Because the real victory wasn't the memo. It wasn't the policy changes, though they mattered. No more name stripping, no more hidden invites, no more shadows. The real victory was the shift I felt in the air. People looked me in the eye now. They asked for my input directly. Even senior leadership copied me on emails they would have once routed through him. My work was visible. My voice counted. But the sweetest moment came from Baxter. 2 weeks after the announcement, I got another email. This one was personal. "We'd like to discuss opportunities for you to continue leading the scenario program, either through your current firm or directly with us." I sat back in my chair, staring at the words. Double pay, signing bonus, authority to build the very systems he had tried to cut me out of. My name, not erased, but highlighted. I thought back to that morning in the glass corridor, the humiliation, the heat in my cheeks, the security guard's puzzled glance. 4 words that had made me feel like nothing. "You're not invited. Go away." And here I was now, invited, not just invited, but required. My presence had become the condition for the client's trust. My absence had voided a meeting. My silence had spoken louder than his voice ever could. The day I signed the offer, I walked through the lobby one last time, past the same badge scanner that had once denied me entry. This time the guard nodded at me with recognition. I wasn't an employee anymore. I was a guest of honor. I paused just for a second and let it sink in. The irony, the symmetry, the poetic justice of it all. He had tried to erase me. Instead, he erased himself. And me? I walked out of those glass doors into the sunlight, head high. Not as someone excluded, but as someone who had proven the simplest truth. Sometimes the sharpest revenge is not raising your voice, but letting the facts do the shouting.